Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Equality in IR Forum. We hope that you've enjoyed today's panel discussions so far today. But a big part of today's agenda is how DE&I and ESG are influencing companies' IR stories and how to ensure authentic messaging. During this session, we'll have a practical case study with Henry Schein, and I'm thrilled to be joined by several members of the team at Henry Schein, who I will introduce now. Thank you so much for joining me. Starting with Stan Bergman, the Chair and CEO of Henry Schein. We're also joined by Carolynne Borders, Vice President of Investor Relations, and Jennifer Kim Field, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Executive Director of the Henry Schein's Cares Foundation. Thank you all so much for joining me today. We're going to get straight into it because we have quite a packed set of topics to discuss. And Stan, I'd love to start with you. Corporations are increasingly focused on workforce gender equality as part of advancing their social programs. We know that the pandemic's effect on women in the workforce has been profound, particularly as statistics show that women have borne the burden of downshifting careers or leaving the workforce to take care of children during this time. How is Henry Schein working to promote gender parity broadly across the global organization, and how have your programs helped families through the pandemic?
That's a broad question, Ben. I'm delighted to be here with you, together with my colleagues Carolynne and Jen. So gender equity is really a moral imperative, but it also makes business sense and is very important as part of the continued success of our business. So we've taken tangible steps over the years to bridge gender equity, gender equality, the gap that may have been there over the years, and we're working all we can to narrow it. So we formally committed to Paradigm for Parity. This is a group that is striving to achieve gender parity in management, all levels, by 2030. We, in fact, measure progress quarterly, and we share those results with our management team. We identify internal executive sponsors to work with us to further advance our gender equality and expand our have expanded our mentorship programs, in fact, to support rising what we call Team Schein members, so we can, in fact, advance diversity in the company. We continue, of course, to work to enable our Team Schein members to have flexibility that accommodates, for example, childcare and work-life balance is important. So we need to facilitate the balance between work and family, all very important if one is to advance gender equality or gender equity. We are working to raise awareness around the company relative to unconscious bias. Very, very important. And it really is unconscious bias. And we need to be aware of what unconscious bias is, because with the best of intents, we can make mistakes. We have regular educational sessions throughout the company. We have round tables on a regular basis. We have 5 employee resource groups, one of which, Women's Leadership Network, was created 3 or 4 years ago to further the development of women leaders in the organization. So we are very committed to this, Ben, and it requires a conscious commitment to advance gender equity, and it's very, very important at Henry Schein.
Very helpful to understand. Thank you. And that's a pretty comprehensive overview of your efforts internally. And Carolynne, I'd love to turn to you on this topic, because not long ago, the topic of gender parity in the workplace wasn't on the mind of investors, and it wasn't deemed to be material, particularly. I'm curious, the extent to which this is now a discussion about talent attraction and retention, and how you can connect Henry Schein's financial performance to its ESG engagement efforts.
Thanks, Ben. So what we've heard from our investors is that they care most about the fact that we are setting goals. So that's true for D&I and as well as other sustainability objectives. And the goals don't need to be perfect. It's understood this is very much an evolution and a journey. And I really do believe that investors are giving us room for that progress. For our Team Schein members internally, We receive a lot of feedback, Stan mentioned, whether it's through town hall meetings or quarterly management meetings on our D&I efforts, and we do believe that they are positively impacting employee morale. It's a subject that is very important to our team, and we believe it has a direct impact, to your point, on both talent retention and attraction. So maybe I'll offer an example of our commitment to the journey. Every 2 years, we conduct a global survey of our team, and it's appropriately called the Pulse Survey. And for the first time this year, we're including specific D&I questions so that we can anonymously collect feedback on what we're doing right and determine areas where we can improve. And with that feedback, we'll drive action plans broadly across the organization, and we'll report those back to the teams so that we're holding ourselves accountable, essentially. And I think that we've demonstrated to our team that we're listening to their feedback, we value that feedback, and we're focused on improvement opportunities. And then, Ben, you also had the question on the connection between our financial performance and ESG engagement. And I would say that at Henry Schein, we have a very firm belief that sustained long-term economic success is directly connected to creating shared value for all of our stakeholders. And we have seen a number of industry studies that support that. One that comes to mind for me was published by Bank of America, and it showed that over a 5-year period, US S&P companies that had high ESG rankings recorded better stock performance than counterparts with lower ratings. And in fact, the high performers outperformed the lower quartile by at least 3% each year over that period. So in my opinion, that's compelling evidence that a purpose-driven strategy is in fact closely tied to long-term economic success.
Excellent. Well, that's really helpful to understand. Thank you, Carolynne. And Stan, I'd like to come back to you because on the topic of gender specifically, Henry Schein was one of the companies that stood up in support of NASDAQ's proposal late last year, encouraging the SEC to adopt new listing rules related to board diversity. I'd love it if you could discuss how Henry Schein views diversity at the board level, and more specifically, how Henry Schein's board has transformed in recent years.
Yes, Ben. I think it's a good question also. Yes, diversity in management and diversity at the board is important. We set the standards for diversity at our board level. NASDAQ had a proposal related to board diversity, and that proposal really aligns with our core principles. We firmly believe that all sectors must work together to foster greater inclusion of underrepresented populations across all organizations. So it's up and down the organization and at the board level. We've at Henry Schein, we strive to attract and retain top talent, like all organizations, be it at the team level or at the board level, and diverse backgrounds and a wide range of experiences are really critical in this regard, in order to promote effective and inclusive decision-making, which I think in the end aligns with our purpose and our values, and as Carolynne mentioned, it drives shareholder value. So there are studies that show that diverse, Carolynne mentioned them, boards really result in a better return, and really good governance works hand in hand with diversity at the board level. You need the two. So from the Henry Schein point of view, as we published in our recent sustainability report for the year 2020, there are 29% of women on our board. Minorities make up 18% of the board of directors. And we've recently announced 3 new board members. They're all from the diverse category. So our goals are to advance board diversification, but in concert with the Henry Schein Diversity and Inclusion Council, the D&I Council, which is a management group, but has a liaison to our board. And the idea here is to advance diversity and inclusion in the company and to the board, and moving up to the board level, and to work closely between the board and management to advance both diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to understand. So I was just going to say, I think that's really helpful to understand. get that connective tissue between the different levels.
Yes,
Sorry, go ahead.
right. No, I was going to also say that our bonuses for our management team do in fact include a D&I component. I forgot to say that. I meant to say.
Excellent. Well, that's also great to know. I think that certainly incentivizes the behavior. Speaking about the board specifically, I'd love to know, to what extent the assessment and evaluation of board directors' contributions and sustainability has evolved in recent years. I think that's a conversation that has been had about boardroom diversity in recent years, is about, whether there needs to be more turnover at board level to encourage greater diversity. I'm curious about the extent to which assessment and evaluation of directors has played a part in your own journey.
Yes, Ben, it ties in really with the previous question, and our nominating and governance committee are actually quite involved in ensuring that we have diversity of thinking on our board. Of course, accounting principles are important at the board level, governance concepts are important at the board level, but we also have to have people from diverse backgrounds of business and from different aspects of just the general population. Our goal is to have our board reflective of society in general. ESG matters are really important as well in general. So our board has quite a lot of experience in ESG in general. And yes, it's very important. And the board takes us very, very seriously. That diversity, as I noted, for all aspects of society, but gender, race, ethnicity, and culture and geography are all very, very important. So the board is involved in this deeply. This is a company that's been committed to purpose, to higher purpose, really for decades, and it's in our very fiber. We were involved in the notion of a commitment to the betterment of society before the term ESG was even invented. So it's very much part of our board psyche, ensuring that we have diversity and inclusion as part of our operating model.
Excellent. Well, that's great to understand. Thank you. And a question for both you and Jen. Closing the gender gap is a journey for most companies today. We've seen countries such as the UK take a step forward with legislation aimed at addressing two different but related issues: equal pay for equal work, and also the difference in average earnings between men and all women across an organization. Can you discuss whether Henry Schein has begun to collect gender compensation data, and if so, how you are developing programs to address any significant gaps?
Thank you, Ben. I can answer the first part of your question related to gender data collection. To say that we're evaluating pay equity. It aligns with our commitment to creating gender parity. Our HR team reviews our pay equity data to understand and solve for any gaps that may exist. And that equity is a key focus in our recruitment, talent planning, and promotion process. And we are actively engaged in equity conversations with our leaders. But I'll turn it over to Stan to talk about that equity piece a little bit more.
Thank you, Jen. Yes. Compensation, promotions, which in fact eventually tie into compensation, takes place at Henry Schein regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, and equal opportunity is critical. We are very, very proud, in fact, of the notion that we have many people that joined our organization in entry-level positions that are actually in senior management today. And we don't look at whether it's a woman, a man, or any background that may be different. Or we want the best team, and we want that team to be reflective of society in general. And yes, we strive to pay for the job, regardless of the person's background.
Great. Jen, coming back to you and the point you were making there about ESG data, there's been increased investor pressure for public companies to disclose workforce data, specifically here in the US in the form of EEO1 data, which Some investors have been calling for years disclosure of that, but I think that momentum has increased behind that conversation in the last year. What does Henry Schein currently disclose, and do you think that will evolve over time?
Well, first, diversity and inclusion is a significant focus for us as part of our ESG initiative. It makes up, as everyone knows, the bulk of the S of ESG. And as Stan mentioned, we find it really important in order to attract, develop, and retain top talent. There's so many studies out there that talk about how it helps to drive innovation within the company. But data transparency, both internally and externally, is critical to advance our D&I efforts, because if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to plan for it for the future? So we track and analyze diversity statistics because we believe that tracking the data will help us understand and plan for continuous improvement. And we obviously want to strive every year to enhance that level of reporting. And so in our most recent report, as Stan alluded to in our sustainability and CSR report that was launched last month, we reported enhanced data on representation of women and ethnic minorities at the leadership level and throughout the organization. And we still have work to do in this journey, but this is a focus of our global teams, because EEO1 data is just for the US, and there's certainly considerations to be made when you think about that from a global perspective. We understand that our stakeholders are increasingly interested in the disclosure of this specific data, and we'll discuss this as part of our potential future reporting initiatives.
Great, that's really helpful to understand. Thanks so much, Jen. And staying with you and Stan, Henry Schein has received praise in recent years for workplace equality, especially with the LGBTQ+ community. What steps has Henry Schein taken to foster such a diverse workforce, and what more can the company do to promote equality and inclusion?
Yeah, Ben, we can never do enough, and we got to be conscious of this every day, that we got to strive to just a little bit better. But as you've heard from the team, our mission is to promote an environment for our team members of all backgrounds, diverse to the extent practical, where each Team Schein member can thrive. And what's important here, we also want to help our customers to operate their practices as best as possible. So our TSMs, our Team Schein members, have to reflect the thinking of our customers and our customers' patients. So we have to be thinking how society at large thinks, and that's got to be deep in the DNA of our sales force. So we have obviously non-discrimination policies across the business, and it turned out that LGBTQ is important to society, and therefore it's important to us. So we're very pleased also with the index, the Human Rights Corporate Equality Index, where this index has a sub-index of best places to work for the LGBTQ community. It's called the Best Places to Work for the LGBT Community Equality Index. And we've received 100% perfect rating for the last 6 years. So this is in our DNA, it just comes naturally. But of course, we have to ensure each day that we work very hard to ensure that our workforce is reflective of society in general. Jen, please.
Yes, and actually, Stan, if I may quote you, you've said it previously, but I think it's good for this audience to hear that diversity is important, but more important is the inclusion part, because we have an integrated approach in our diversity and inclusion journey, and there's sort of 4 pillars of that. One is cultivating our culture, which you just spoke to, recruiting and retaining diverse talent, which we spoke earlier about, supporting our marketplace, and then continuing our commitment to society. So as Stan mentioned, we have our employee resource groups, not only the Women's Leadership Network, but the Pride and Allies for LGBTQ. We also have our Black Legacy Professionals, and these are great examples of the broadening of our scope and outreach within Henry Schein, and we think that it will contribute to our relationships with our customers, but particularly aligning with small and disadvantaged businesses, right? So whether that's veteran-owned, LGBTQ, ethnic minority, or women-owned small businesses as well.
Excellent, thank you. And I think to build on that point as well, Sam, to go back to what you were saying a moment ago, there's a broader conversation right now about stakeholder capitalism in society and in the capital markets. And I think recognizing the interests of your different stakeholders and the issues that are really meaningful and important to them, and then thinking about how you can reflect that in your company, both in terms of the people that work at your company, the retention and attraction and so on, is an extremely important part of that. So I think that really makes sense as that connective tissue under that banner of stakeholder capitalism. But Carolynne, I'd love to throw it to you because we've talked today about a number of ESG topics that are growing in prominence among investors, but still aren't mainstream for many. Have you found that you attract investors that are drawn to the progress that Henry Schein has made with its ESG initiatives, including DE&I and workplace culture? And how is the investment landscape evolving as ESG disclosure becomes more important to investment decisions?
It's a great question, Ben. So in our view, both the buy and the sell side recognize that Henry Schein's engagement has been a powerful driver of our long-term success. And we base that view on the feedback that we receive from our interactions on a daily basis, on the way that the analysts are reporting on our company, and then in the 13F filings and who actually owns the stock. To borrow something that Stan said a little bit earlier, we've been working on these commitments for quite a long time, even when it wasn't actually referred to as ESG. So we do find that more funds are integrating ESG into their investment considerations, and some socially responsible funds, such as Generation Investment, have even launched their own climate disclosure frameworks that they expect the companies they own to work towards in terms of disclosure. And I do think we're going to see more of that as we move ahead. We also see more investors who are bringing their ESG analysts to the meetings. So it's more of a collaborative discussion with the portfolio manager and the ESG analysts as they make decisions. And on the sell side, firms are starting to add a section in their reports to comment on how companies score on ESG criteria relative to their coverage universe. So I think as you read more sell side reports, you're going to see that become more prevalent. And it really is becoming more broadly embedded across the investment community. When I think about events that we do, we're participating in more analyst and industry events that are focused on ESG. It's a great opportunity for us to tell our ESG story, but also to learn from other companies that are executing strong programs. We hosted our first internal ESG panel just recently with a number of investors and one of our key supply chain partners. And we took that opportunity to end the discussion with a call to action for our team, which is represented by a global universe for Henry Schein, asking them to become ESG champions in support of our global efforts, because this is very much a collaborative effort and we really do need help from across the organization. And I would just put a little plug in that if anyone's interested, they can see that panel presentation on our investor relations website. So Ben, if I just sum up my thoughts on messaging to the ESG investor base, I would say that we're working to attract new ESG investors through our targeting program. We're highlighting our goals, including GRI and SASB compliance by 2022. And in the next couple of years, reporting in line with TCFD and establishing a science-based target. And we've also begun to integrate ESG commentary into our earnings call. So in my mind, the best proof that our message is resonating is if you look at our list of top shareholders. And I think Stan would agree, we're very pleased that the vast majority of these top holders consider ESG as part of their investment mandate. So we're making progress and we're looking to build upon that.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's really helpful to understand. And I think, yeah, to that point, the point about progress, I think that's a really important takeaway. As we mentioned at the start of this call, I think everyone's on a journey. And as you outlined, all public companies are on this journey, as are the buy side and the sell side. And so recognizing the ways in which ESG is becoming more of a factor in conversations and IR activities from all sides, I think is really helpful to understand. But another part of this conversation, and a big part of today's event, is thinking about community and thinking about the role that we can play, not just within our own house, but within our broader community. Of course, today's event is about equality in IR as a community as a whole. And I know that Stan, Henry Schein, is not only focused on internal gender equality and DE&I work, but has also been an industry leader in supporting more broadly these efforts in the healthcare profession and communities at large. Why have you felt this is important to Henry Schein?
Yes, Ben. I think, of course, Henry Schein needs to reflect the demographics of our society, but I think we need to help our customers advance that goal too, so that our customers, the healthcare professionals, in fact, reflect the demographics of the country. And we've been very active in this starting in the mid-90s, where we actually convened a conference of dentists to advance healthcare equity and diversity in dentistry, and co-founded the American Dental Association's Minority Leadership Institute. You know, racial inequalities in access to healthcare is a terrible moral issue, but it's also not good for the country. We want everybody to be healthy because that drives up the quality of health for everyone. So we understand that the drivers of health inequalities can, in fact, be focused on to reduce any gaps we may have in access to care. So this requires us to find innovative ways to advance health in society in general and health equity in general through these diversity encouraging programs, if you want to put it that way. And I think we want to encourage diversity in healthcare. In 2020, we signed the World Economic Forum's Partnership in Racial Justice in Business and continue to work with the World Economic Forum in this area. And then we took it down to the professional level, where you know that there were significant inequalities and injustices actually in healthcare that took place during COVID. And so we're a very active member, and we partner with the Black Coalition Against COVID, the National Dental Association, which advances oral care and diversity, the National Medical Association, the Hispanic Dental Society, and the Society of American Indian Dentists. And all of these programs, working with the professional societies, whether it's the American Dental Association or the host of medical associations we're involved with, really advance diversity. And we're very, very in the provider networks that we support. And at the end of the day, closing the gaps in inequality from a diversity from a particular part of society point of view. If we can reduce those gaps, we feel we're doing a good job for the world, for our customers, and for Henry Schein.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to end on, about the connectivity between all of the different communities that you touch, whether those are internal or external. So I think that's a great point to make. We are up on time, so I'd like to say a huge thank you to the three of you for joining us today. So thank you so much, Stan, Jen, and Carolynne, for this discussion. It's been really enlightening to learn more about Henry Schein's culture and how it values DE&I, both internally and externally, and tells that story to the investment community. So thank you all so much. And to our audience, next up, we'll be going into a networking break. We hope that you're able to make the most of the networking functionality on our platform to meet many of the attendees. I've certainly found that the networking function is very rich and a great way to get to know people who are tuning in, and not just feel like you're sitting at your computer watching several panels. So please do enjoy the networking function. And once again, thank you so much to Stan, to Jen, and to Carolynne from Henry Schein. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.